Hi, welcome back to Ethics. I'm Tom. In this video, I want to talk about the final paper, the third paper on Socrates and Thrasymachus, and just give some pointers. This is kind of a difficult debate to conceptualize, and so there are a few things to kind of point out to make sure that students are on the right track in terms of the trajectory and the kind of register of the debate between Socrates and Thrasymachus. The biggest thing is to really understand what Thrasymachus's position is. And that is that he not only thinks that people are selfish, that might is right, and that the people who are in power make the rules, right? But he also thinks that that is the value system we should have, right? So not only does he think people are selfish, but he thinks that people should be selfish, right? There's a big difference, right? He's proposing a value system that runs counter to the kind of value system we tend to think is ethical, right? But he just has a different framework for what being ethical amounts to, right? So when I say in the prompt that Thrasymachus is being more realistic about human nature and what ethics really look like, what I mean is that he to say Thrasymachus is more realistic is not just to say that he's right to point out that people are oftentimes selfish. The idea is that he's more realistic in terms of the value systems we really hold, right? And all the kind of stuff after this part of Plato's Republic is about, I've kind of designed to help you kind of fill out what that position would look like, right? So the Ring of Gyges is supposed to show that the value system that we really have, when you kind of strip all the kind of social what would you say, social consequences and concerns about what people think and all that kind of stuff, is that we would do, quote unquote, bad things, right? We would steal, we would maybe commit violence, we would do all the things that are like, we'd break all the rules, right? Because really, the idea for Thrasymachus is that we don't really endorse those rules. That's the idea, okay? And also the same thing with Nietzsche. Nietzsche gives a more bold kind of historical account like this to show that, there are value systems, what he calls master morality, where people kind of endorse the idea that if you have the power, you deserve it, right? That's the idea. And also if you want to attack Thrasymachus, right? The places where Thrasymachus is vulnerable is in the fact that he definitely advocates for a kind of relativism. So he's advocating for the idea that what is right is only relative to self-interest, and how that manifests is in the law of the land, right? So the people in power make rules in accord with their self-interest, and everyone kind of adopts it as some sense of what's right. He talks about it's right to follow the law because the law is written by the people who have the power. And so that would mean that, ethics value systems are only kind of relative to certain cultural, historical places and times, right? Certain civilizations. So this is a kind of cultural relativism. And so that means that all of the objections that Rachel's levels against cultural relativism are also threats against Thrasymachus, right? And on the other end of the spectrum, if you want to endorse Thrasymachus and you want to kind of attack some of the claims that Socrates makes, you need to also kind of really take into consideration what Socrates' position is, right? He thinks there is some kind of logical priority to the idea that you need to kind of your craft, self-interest always has to come second to whatever it is you're trying to do, right? And that, doing things good or well or ethically is kind of uh, packaged into the way in which we act at all, right? So for being a ruler, right, like you can't be a corrupt ruler right off the bat. If everyone knows you're corrupt and you're only out for yourself, no one's going to elect you. You need to at least have the kind of facade of acting out of the interest of the people who are going to elect you or who you're going to rule over. And same thing with a craft, right? It has to proceed making money, because if you're only out for money, then your craft won't be good enough to really make money. And also this idea of honor among thieves. And so, if you want to attack that, what Socrates' position, or Plato's position, really is that self-interest has to come secondary to your interest with doing things well, or doing things right, or doing things good, right? And so if you want to attack that, you have to show that those you're concerned with doing a craft or doing things good or doing things well always comes actually secondary to self-interest, right? So it's a question of priority. So in one more thing about Socrates, if you're kind of using Thrasymachus to make an objection against Socrates, you can't say that, well, people are always going to do bad things, right? Or politicians will always be corrupt, or people will always do bad things. That really does not speak against Plato's position, which is that we ought to do well, right? We ought to not be corrupt, right? And so just because people fall short of ideals doesn't mean that they're the wrong ideals. Okay. So, the example I tend to give to students is just because people continue to steal does not mean that the ideal of not stealing is wrong, right? It just means that people fall short of it. Now, the debate between Thrasymachus and Plato has to do with what our ideals are, right? Socrates or Thrasymachus really thinks that our ideals are self-interest, selfishness, greed, these power. Those are our genuine ideals that we strive for. And sometimes we get in our own way in doing that, but that's really, if we took a good look at ourselves, that's what our ideals really are. Socrates thinks the opposite, right? He thinks, no, our ideals are really, about, service to others, doing things well, acting out of the interest of others, this kind of stuff. And so, one way to kind of sum this up is to think about what a corrupt politician is, right? Now, if you think that a politician acting corruptly, right, is an impoverishment, if they're falling short of what they should be doing or what they ought to be doing, then you agree with Socrates, right, and Plato on this. But if you think a corrupt politician is really doing what a politician should do, right, that they're gaming the system and that's the right thing to do, then you agree with Thrasymachus, right? So they both admit that there are people who are doing things that, like, corrupt politicians, that they exist, but they approach it and cast it and give it context in different ways, right? Thrasymachus thinks a corrupt politician is really, in some sense, a good politician, right? That's a politician that knows what they're doing, right, and is using power to their advantage, and that's what they should be doing. Socrates thinks a corrupt politician is an impoverished politician. They're falling short of the standard of what they should be doing, right? They're acting unethically, right? So this is the debate, and it can be difficult to kind of grasp, but try to stay focused on this debate. And it's a debate about ethics, right? It's a debate about what we should be doing, and that's different than concerns about anthropology, about the way people have acted in the past, or sociology or history or something like this. They're related subjects, but Thrasymachus is not making a historical claim about the way people have acted. he's making a claim about the way people should act, right? And so that's the, remember, this all goes back to the first week that we are learning ethics, right? Ethics has everything to do with how you ought to act, and this is a debate in ethical theory. And so just be sure to keep that register in mind, that that's the level at which this debate is occurring, and that will help your paper a great deal. Okay, that's it. Good luck on the papers, and I look forward to reading them.